Hello everyone, I'm Dylan Jones, I'm the Editor-in-Chief of British GQ, and I'd like to welcome you to this special event, which is part of Sotheby's autumn series of talks, organised in partnership with Intelligence Squared. Today we are going to be focusing on the brilliant new exhibition, Tracey Emin, Edvard Munch, The Loneliness of the Soul, which is coming up at the Royal Academy in London, and will then go on to the new Munch Museum in Oslo next year. And I'm delighted to have with me the artist, Tracey Emin. She's been a major figure in contemporary art for over 25 years now. She is known for using her life experiences as inspiration for works ranging from painting, drawing, video and installation to photography, needlework and sculpture. Hello, Tracey.
Hello.
And joining us from Oslo, we have Kari Brandtzaeg, art historian and curator at the Munch Museum in Oslo and curator of the Emin Munch exhibition. Hello, Kari.
Hello, from Oslo.
And in New York, we have Simon Shaw, vice chairman of Sotheby's Global Fine Arts. Hi, Simon.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone.
So, Tracey, it's such a pleasure to be talking with you today. Really extraordinary exhibition. I was lucky enough, as you know, because you invited me to have a brief preview of the show just before lockdown, literally just before lockdown, before the lockdown prevented it being open to the public. Can you just explain where your fascination with Munch began and what was it about him that's always appealed to you?
Well, I first come across Munch's work in a book on expressionism. I was trying to find out who Egon Schiele was, and then there was a Munch picture, and I thought, wow, this is pretty incredible. And it was like I was about 15 then, and it was about another 2 years later that I really discovered Munch in a big way, because I was interested in doing woodcuts and lino cuts first of all, then woodcuts, and the king of woodcuts is Edvard Munch. So I discovered his work, not really by the kind of work that he made, but the medium that he used, which was woodcut. And I just fell madly in love with him, not just his work, but him, his attitude towards art, his personality, the way he dressed, his writing, everything about his poetry, everything about him was just like an artist, a complete total artist for me. And it was like a major discovery, because so you had Van Gogh before, who made work about himself and how he felt. But then Munch actually made work about these universal feelings, from jealousy, fear, hunger, love, regret, remorse, everything, which I could really relate to even at that really young age. And I thought, wow, this is a kindred spirit, this is a friend. So with Munch, it wasn't just like being in love with his art, it was being in love with the person that he was who made the art, and that was really important to me.
Now, Kari, you've curated this exhibition with Tracey. Can you tell us how it all came about?
Oh, it's a long story. I will keep it short. When I started up my position as a curator at the Munch Museum 5 years ago, I was asked what kind of dream exhibition I would like to do. And I said, of course, that might be a show with Tracey Emin and Edvard Munch. Because I first discovered Tracey Emin art in 1997. I was then doing a research project at the art scene in Glasgow, comparing it with the art scene in London, and I became, of course, very aware of Tracey's art and her confessional art, and it just was something I needed to explore more of. And I took the night bus into London to see her exhibition, I Need Art as I Need Art Like I Need God, at the South London Gallery in 1997. And it was so just mind-blowing, and I became just obsessed. I spent a lot of hours just discovering all her texts, all the kind of expressions in this really interesting show. And it was something very new for me, but something also familiar. And it had these references to a Nordic melancholy, to Edvard Munch, to these very emotional feelings that, of course, as a woman at nearly the same age as Tracy, we were young then, 23 years ago, and yeah, it was something I really wanted to explore further. And I wrote an article then in a Norwegian newspaper called "On a Tight Line Between Art and Life." And that is what it is about when it comes to Tracy's art. And also that is something, it's a tight line between art and life also in Edvard Munch's art, how they use their own past experiences, memories, and feelings related to special events in childhood. So that's something also we will see in this exhibition, The Loneliness of the Soul. Yeah,
how
and
do
in
you
a way
go
I
about choosing the works?
Yes, that's Tracy and I. We started to work together 3 years ago, so it's quite a long time. We talked a lot about the concept, and Tracy didn't want to do a retrospective, of course. She was and more about the feelings that was possible to find in Edvard Munch's art that is you also are obvious in Tracy's art. So especially this, one of the watercolors Tracy selected, Seated Female Nude. And it's also about aging, it's about sexuality, and about also how Munch explored the female body in a way. And for me, this picture, I know maybe Tracy doesn't, this says something very important with this show. You see this heaviness in the figure and how she is, in a way, locked in her own mind with a lot of memories. So there are 7 paintings by Munch in the show and 10 watercolors. And I suppose Tracy will tell more about how she selected the paintings and watercolors.
Well, Tracy, how was the process for you in terms of choosing the images?
It was fantastic. So me and Harry, who works with me, we went to Oslo. We went to the Munch Museum, and it was like a dream come true. We had access all areas, and we were, and so it's brilliant. It's like going to the Bank of England. You go down these stairs, and you open up these vault doors. You go in one chamber, then you go to the next chamber, and there's these racks, and you pull them out. And as you pull them out, there are like 8 monks, 4 monks, 5 monks, and we looked at 800 paintings in 2 days. And at the beginning, we were pulling them across, going, I was like almost having a fucking orgasm, you know. It was just like so. I just couldn't believe it. And to have my nose this close to a Munch painting, it was just unbelievable. And at the beginning, I wanted every painting, and we didn't know exactly how we were going to curate the show, what the title was. And so, I mean, Munch did hundreds of paintings of animals and lots of paintings of his dogs. We could have had like a cute animal show if we wanted. But it was really good. By the end of the first morning, we were pulling them across. We just go, no, I don't like that one. Put it back. What the hell was he thinking then? Oh, he was looking at Matisse. He was definitely looking at Matisse. He shouldn't have looked at Matisse. Yeah, and we would go, oh, obviously Cubism was coming along when he did those ones, you know, and we were like suddenly become really blasé with it and had to pull ourselves together and understand what we were looking. It was phenomenal. And then the watercolors, it was a really good moment when I started crying and they had to pull them away from underneath me. That great collaboration 100 years later, you know. But it was so fantastic, and looking at his objects, looking at his things, his paintbrushes, his paint, touching his furniture. His hat moved when we opened up a box. The door closed on its own. It was all very Munchy and ghosty and atmospheric and just absolutely amazing. And it wasn't until about, I think Kari will know, it was about like visit number 4. Oh, funny it took so long, that we decided what the show was going to possibly be about, how it was going to come together, and what we were really homing in on. And loneliness was what I decided to choose to curate the subject. And then we all worked together. Kari and I worked on, choosing the works, choosing the paintings, and coming up with like a complete idea. And then also within that, of course, loneliness is a reflection of not being with someone. So there's the idea about the couple who are alone, the couple who are apart, the couple who are more alone than the singular person. So I was dealing with that within the terms of choosing the work as well. But it was like, I wish I'd done a PhD at the time. I wish I'd wrote a whole big long thesis, or, it was such a phenomenal thing in my life to be able to be this close to Munch's work. It was amazing. Sorry, overexcited
as well. A real privilege. Now, Simon, is it really true that the Scream, Munch's The Scream, is the only artwork to have its own emoji?
It is, Dylan. I mean, it's actually. It's not only the only painting that has an emoji on your iPhone. It actually has 2. I think we've got a slide which shows these. There is we've got the Scream on the left, and a fetching pussycat scream on the right. So I think this. I make that point because I think it reflects quite nicely the fact that the Scream is something other than a painting. It transcends Munch, it transcends Norway, expressionism, its time, all of this stuff. It's a phenomenon. It's something else. It's really like a cornerstone of our visual culture. If we look at the slides, we can see that like every day the Scream gets pressed into service like in a million different ways as kind of visual shorthand for anxiety, for angst, for horror. Yeah. If we go on to the next one, we've got some examples of that, where you can see that from Andy Warhol upper left on the one hand, through Macaulay Culkin. This is an image that you can show high culture, low culture, anywhere in the world. People are going to know what it is. Where's Craven's series of films there? This is an old slide, so I updated it because 2 minutes Googling this next slide took me, right? Try it at home, or the previous one, where it changes depending on the context. This is all the Scream for 2020. I thought it'd be fun to see these people using it in today's climate. I'm not going to spend too long on this, but let me just draw your attention to the one on the right, which I like particularly. This is called the Scream in the age of social distancing, where the figures gone all together. Yeah. So if we go back to the pictures of Munch's own work rather than these appropriations, this is a painting that we sold at Sotheby's in 2012, and when it achieved $120 million, that was the highest price ever paid for any work of art ever at auction. And it was, while nobody knew what the hell the thing was worth when we went into the sale, I think that was like a very fitting price, that this painting of all images should be valued the most highest, because this is really the image of the 20th century. How did it become the most famous iconic image of the 20th century? Well, there are 2 parts to that question. First of all, there's Munch's big idea, which Tracy's already alluded to. Look, in very, very crude terms, until Munch came along, art was about what things looked like. And Munch basically turned the eye in on itself. He wasn't really interested in what things looked like at all. He was interested in what they felt like. So trying to paint an interior landscape, trying to paint emotion and mood and feeling. And what he does in the 1890s with the Scream and a series of related images is paint something he calls the modern life of the soul. It's a cycle of the psychic, emotional experience that everybody is going to go through in the 20th century. Remember, this is painted just on the cusp of the 20th century. Sure. When Freud and Nietzsche are also writing, and God is dead, we need to find a new religion. And what happens in the 20th century is subjectivity, and the self becomes our new religion. So as the 20th century dawns, Munch has captured, probably without anticipating how powerful the thing was, he's captured it in one kind of really dense, instantly recognizable image. Now, I said there were two parts of the story. The second part is that it's only in the second half of the 20th century that the Scream really becomes probably the second most famous image in the world after the Mona Lisa. And that's because after the Second World War, the Scream looks different. You know, once you look at this image after the Holocaust, once you look at this image after Hiroshima, Nagasaki, once you look at this image after Vietnam, remember that photograph of the kids running from the napalm like this? I think probably looking at this image after COVID is also going to kind of inform our viewing of the image. Somehow it became, you know, something much more than it began. It became the defining image of our times.
But also, it's true to a certain extent that he introduced the idea that art doesn't have to be beautiful.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think probably this is the first time in 1892, 93, when Munch sits down to do this, that an artist says, I want to paint something that is so repulsive that you're not going to be able to look at it. Literally everything about this image, you know, from this kind of sexless, spineless, featureless, hairless figure flailing in the wind in the foreground, to this jarring, vivid, clashing palette, to this sort of vortex of energy, this whoosh dragging you along the balustrade there, to also this vertiginous perspective, which is kind of trying to knock you off your feet. Everything about this picture is trying to shock you, to repulse you, to push you away. But, and it's a really big but, the true magic of the Scream, and why, to go back to the beginning, it's an emoji and it's so memorable, is at exactly the same time, every single one of us knows how that guy feels. There is an empathy within this picture, as well as the horror and the repulsion. There's a kind of push-pull going on, particularly in 2020, the year that I've had, and I'm sure we've all had. We all have that Scream inside us. You know, we all have that sense of horror at the heart of us, and the image speaks very directly to that.
Tracy, the exhibition obviously features works by both you and Munch of women, nude women, and many of your paintings, it might be said, reference Munch. But how can you explain how, as a woman, you approach the female nude differently from how a man would?
Well, it's not nude women, it's me, number one. So I'm using myself as the model. I'm using myself as the self. And I'm not being gratuitous. I'm not being abusive. I'm not taking advantage. I'm learning more about myself. The investigation is within me. But saying that, Munch was really fantastic with women. He was known to be a gentleman. Everybody that modelled for him always said that he was really a real gentleman. And what they meant was he didn't fuck them. Whereas anybody else that modelled for an artist would... It was part of the deal. That's what happened. But Munch never did that. From his housekeeper to his models to the it girls, they all said the same thing. And my theory on that, without wanting to sound too sort of strange, was I always thought that at the beginning, for the first 20 years of liking Munch's work, I just presumed he was gay. I never thought any otherwise. And also, when you look at his paintings of men, they're so sexual and they've got so much fecundity, and they're sort of like the men wrestling, him wrestling in the mud and all this kind of thing and everything. And then when you see his pictures of women, they're always like these caricature femme fatales or whatever, or these crying figures, or and also they're fantastic, the breast and the top. I mean, even like the weeping woman, she has no nipples. And then there's these tits everywhere on the wallpaper, for example. Just like it's just really, it's interesting. And then when he goes to paint the bottom of the female nude, he gets in a mess. He's in a mess quite often. It's almost like he can't look. He can't dare to look. And the reason I think is because, and then obviously with the men, he could see himself. He used himself as a model, maybe sometimes, I don't know. But it's such a strong thing. The men are so much more sexual than the women. It's quite odd.
Yeah.
And can I just say something about the Scream? I've always thought that the Scream, what is screaming is the landscape, not the small figure. And also Munch was really interested in Egypt and at that time he supposedly, even though I don't think he actually had sex with a woman, someone had a miscarriage that he was very close with, and I think that was like also to do with like the fetus within the landscape, the soul leaving or escaping. So I just wanted to say that. And this is really, really one of my favorite paintings completely, because this chair is supposed to be the chair that his sister died on, which he took everywhere, this wicker chair, or else got a similar one or something. But what I find really interesting is like it's almost like she's had a miscarriage, like she's bleeding, like she's left sure. This fetal thing behind, and she's just looking, it's over, it's dead, it's going. And that's what also I feel about, as I said, with the scream, I'm convinced it's a fetus, not a person, not a thing, but a half soul that screams, a whole soul, but not a whole human.
You talk about the chair here. What about the theme of the bed in both your work and Munch's work?
Yeah, it's pretty brilliant actually, because I know this might sound really ignorant or naive of me. I never focused on Munch's beds. I was always focusing on his subject, not what was in the pictures or what made the pictures. And now it's kind of weird, like so many of them have the bed in it. The bed is almost like a sort of like background star to everything that he did. So it's really interesting. And it's like a stage, like a prop, exactly what my bed was like. My bed was like a mini stage to tell a story, to express how I was feeling. And Munch's beds do the same thing, especially with paintings like Between the Bed and the Clock and the Bed. But yeah, it's like.
Do you find them sexual? Are his beds sexual?
Yeah, some of them. Yeah, they're really erotic. And Munch's work is erotic. I mean, of course it is. And there's a lot of the very erotic ones we don't see. Don't ask me why, but we don't see them. And they're often hidden, and I don't know why, but I think it's because they're probably in private collections hanging on people's walls, and it's rare that they come out. So, but Munch was kind of sexual. He had all this sort of sexual energy within him, and he threw it into his canvases. He threw it into the work, and there's a really big difference between his really big giant paintings and his small paintings, the ones that he did indoors and the one that he did outdoors. The ones that he did in his outdoor studios are wild, because he was naked and he was throwing the paint everywhere. And people think it's strange that he was photographed himself naked, and that's because he painted naked, because when he got the paint off him, it was the easiest way to, and it was the summer and everything. I mean, he was kind of like this primal, I mean, really amazing man, actually. I'm starting to fall in love with him all over again.
Kari, can you shed some light on this about why perhaps some of Munch's more overtly sexual work is not seen as some of his more popular pieces?
If I could say something about that, I don't know, but I suppose some of there are a lot of sexuality in Munch's art, and as Tracy says, there have been some myths about that he was gay, but he had some strong relationship with really strong women when he was a young man. And he was also in a society around this Christiania Bohème in the 1890s with females, strong independent females as Dagny Juel, as Eva Munch, and Oda Krog, for example. And he knew all these women. And some places he also says that he lived in a time of women emancipation, and then the man became the weaker sex. And that was, of course, a bit frightening at that time. But he respected the women a lot. And, he was raised by his aunt, Tante Karen, and he had 3 sisters. And you may also see that he had a high regard of women, and he respected them a lot. But he was also maybe a bit frightened that women should destroy his ability to create art. He sometimes mentioned this when he had this really passionate relationship with Tulla Larsen, for example, that he felt so weak when she all the time wanted to hug him and kiss him and make love with him. So because of that, in a way, he decided that he wanted to live alone, and that the art became his children.
Sure.
And you see, he is from all the watercolors Tracy has selected, that he had this really ability to see the female body in different ways.
Sure. Tracy, can you talk about your briefly talk about your photo installation Insomnia?
It's funny because I was awake all night last night from midnight until about 7 o'clock this morning, so I really can't talk about Insomnia right now. So I suffer from it really terribly, and this is about maybe 5 years ago. I was looking in my bedroom, and there's, you know, that sometimes like a crack of light comes through from outside, even though it's dark.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that looks, you know, sort of 3 in the morning. That looks interesting. I'll take a photo of it. So I took a photo of it, but I had the lens on the wrong way, and it took a selfie of me, and it was kind of all like dark and black, but atmospheric. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what I really look like. So I took another one, and then another one, and then another one. And I thought, oh, Christ, I look terrible. I wonder if I could take one of me looking better. And so instead of sitting there having insomnia, laying there having insomnia, and also with insomnia, you can't work, because if you can work, you haven't got insomnia. You're working at night. It's very different. Insomnia, you're trapped in whatever. And so then I just started doing all these selfies when I woke up, when I went to bed, whatever, when I went to sleep, or when I couldn't sleep, when I was trapped, whatever. And I had hundreds, and I'd forgotten how many I had, and I didn't know what I was going to do with them. And then I liked them, so I thought originally like print them up quite small, or maybe make a book. And then very Tracy, I thought, oh, I'll kind of make it 6 foot by 4.5 foot or whatever, and then I'll print up another one. And then my show at White Cube came up, and I got the access to the other room, and I thought, that's it. That's what I'll do. I'll show people what insomnia feels like, not what it looks like, but what it feels like. And they're not flattering photos, because insomnia is not a flattering pastime. It's a hell. It's a living hell. It really is awful. Anyone who suffers from it will know that. So, and Munch suffered from it terribly, and he writes about this, and a lot of his work is this is insomnia, this painting. And his head looks like a onion, or it looks like a ghost. It looks weird, because when you've got insomnia, you do. And he's sitting on the edge of the bed as well, which is something I do quite often with the insomnia. I lay, and then I'll just get up and sit up on the edge of the bed. So I must do some of these paintings. Good bit of inspiration there. Yeah, the edge of the bed, the edge of life. Yeah.
Simon, you were talking earlier about the you referenced the selfie, and actually you can trace a lot of today's narcissistic culture straight back to Munch, can't you?
Well, that's right. I mean, he was a pioneer in so many ways as a printmaker, you know, as well as the subject matter, and his on a technical level. And one of the things he loved to do was to take these images of himself on a regular basis, like right through his career. We actually started the slideshow today with a 1902 fabulous self-portrait, a selfie of him in his studio in Berlin there. I think many people would claim to have invented the selfie, but Munch probably has a stronger claim than most. I mean, it's his whole existence, his life, his art, his writings are about they're about the self, right? It's about how he teases out of his own life experience, his own emotion and feeling, a kind of universal emotional story that we all lead through. There's a great one on the screen here from the years just before he passes away. So I think the kind of the narcissism, yes, the self-obsessed culture that dominates our inboxes and our Instagram feeds today, you can draw a direct line back to Munch at the turn of the 20th century.
Where did that drive come from for him to do that? Where did the ambition come from? Because it's quite an old thing to do.
I mean, he's a fascinating character in terms of his ambition. Look, he lost his mother and his sister early along. He had a religious bourgeois upbringing in Norway, and he left and he rebelled against all of that. He experimented. He was like, I don't know. I think if you look at him in the 1890s in Berlin, where he's hanging out, drinking, taking drugs with Strindberg and others, he just had a huge appetite for life. And the only way that he could process it was through his art somehow. He needed to experience and feel everything in a very emphatic, painful way. And I think that's why he remains as universally accessible today as he did in the 1890s. You know, what he's dealing with is the fundamental stuff of life in all its messiness and lyricism and tragedy and poetry and eroticism. It's all there in his work in the same way that it's in our lives today.
Yeah.
Dylan, can I just say something about that with Munch? Munch loved technology. He got every new camera. He was the first person to get a telephone in Norway, like private person. He was the first person to get a Ford motor car from America. He loved everything that was 20th century, and he was very pioneering in all technological things. And people never think about Munch like that. People always think about Munch as being this wild, woolly Norwegian, you know, in fields and, you know, but he wasn't. He was like, and he dressed fantastically too. And he was just like really super stylish and Munch, yeah.
You are.
You go all misty-eyed.
I could add something. Yes.
Kari, next year is obviously going to be a big year for Tracy. It's going to be a huge year for Munch. So what's happening in Oslo next year?
Okay. We hope it will be a really year to celebrate Edvard Munch. And we will have the opening of the new Munch Museum in Bjørvika. The new name is actually only Munch, so we have to learn to say only at the Munch. But so we hope to open summer with Tracy Emin as a first kind of contemporary show in the new Munch Museum. And you see how it's in the harbor area of the center of Oslo, and is the Spanish architect Herreros, and is like 13th floor, and it has a splendid view over the Oslo fjord. And we really hope that a lot of viewers and art lovers will come and see the new building and all the new exhibitions we will have, because there will also be new exhibitions from the collections, from the Munch's paintings, and now we are also able to show the iconic Scream all the time that we have not been able to do in the old Munch Museum at Tøyen. So there will be a house filled with Munch's art.
Okay.
And hopefully also, I had this little slide by this Munch's little house. I and Tracy, we should actually go to this place, Hvitsten, this spring in April, but unfortunately it didn't happen when the COVID-19 pandemic came. But I visited this small house Munch bought in 1909 when he returned from Copenhagen from the clinic. He was at the Dr. Jacobsen's nerve clinic. First he stayed in Kragerø for some months, and then he decided to buy this little house in Hvitsten. It's also by the Oslo fjord with a beautiful view, because here he concluded, he worked on this monumental painting for the university aula, you know, the big sun and alma mater, history, all these major paintings. So he needed a lot of space and free air, and he bought this little house, and now it's under renovation, and it will be ready to open also in summer. So that will also be a new Munch destination. And we have the small cabin in Åsgårdstrand as well that Tracy and I visited a couple of years ago. So
a big year and a lot to see. Now, in a minute, we're going to go to questions. So I hope there are lots of questions coming in. But before we do, Tracy, can you just tell us about the statue to Munch that you've made?
Oh, well, so there was a competition for a large monumental sculpture to go in front of the Munch, the Munch Museum, and by the field. And I entered this competition thinking that I didn't stand a chance, and I won. And it's going to be a 9-meter high bronze that's called the Mother. And my idea was very simple, that Munch didn't have a mother for most of his life. And I was going to give Munch a mother. And at the same time, my mother had just died. And so I wanted to make a tribute to her. And also something for women, old women. Women, I didn't want to make just like a sort of, we see lots of homages to women that are young and graceful and beautiful, or like literally the 3 graces or whatever. But I wanted to have a woman that was older, that was a real mother figure. And it's really big, and her legs are kind of open, and she's looking out to the field, and she's holding her hands like this to cradle. And it's a woman, and it's a mother, and it's for Munch. And I did it to protect his paintings, to protect him, and also to welcome people into Norway. It will be beautiful.
Thank you very much, Tracy. We've got quite a lot of questions coming in now. This is an interesting question, considering what's been said in the last 40 minutes, which slightly goes against the ebbs and flows of the discussion. But the question is: traditionally, Munch was seen as a misogynist artist. Is this a fair assumption?
No, absolutely not. No.
I mean, that was the traditional. Well, because he, when he's painting in the 1890s, there's this kind of symbolist fascination with sex and gender relations that Munch is very much engaged with. But I totally agree that reading is now like wildly out of date. Actually, you've got a couple of images on your screen which speak to that quite well. On the right, the vampire image there, one of the great compositions from the Frieze of Life, like the Scream. It's known as the Vampire. And people assume that it's this like wonderfully like gorgeous redhead sinking her teeth into the back of a guy's neck. Well, that's actually not true at all. This is a picture that Munch didn't call Vampire. It was called Love and Pain. And Munch explained to us it was actually about somebody kissing in a very tender way, like the back of the neck. But it was suggested by a critic who went to see the Frieze of Life exhibition that this was a vampire, and he said, "Yeah, hey, let's just roll with it." And I think right there you have that kind of dialectic of what Munch was very ambivalent, let's say, about gender relations. There's certainly today room for much more kind of nuanced readings. He certainly had a great fear of women on occasions. He had great desire for women too. I think Tracy's idea of this sculpture of bringing back his mother is an amazing one, because I always wonder how Munch's life and his art would have been different if he had a mother, if he wasn't pushed out into the world in the way that he was. He described the fact, this kind of terrible upbringing he had, losing members of his family, and he nearly died himself as a kid. He said sickness and insanity and death were the angels that were watching over my cradle, and he never left that sense of his own vulnerability. And I think his kind of sense of gender really played into that.
Question here for Tracy. Lovely question. Tracy, your work makes me feel something I can't explain. It's simply incredible and moving. Apart from Munch, who else does
Well, in a really emotional way, when I was young, Kate Kollwitz was one of my favourite artists. Obviously, I really respect Louise Bourgeois, and I knew her. I like Bruce Nauman. But Egon Schiele, Vermeer, Goya, Velasquez. Yeah, it's quite eclectic and quite mixed up. But Munch is I could go on mastermind talking about Munch. I love Munch, right? I adore Munch. He's my man. You know, I did my thesis at college when I was in my art thesis, and it was called My Man Munch. You know, and that was back in like 1984 or something. You know, I like art that's passionate, that has emotion, that makes me feel something, and sometimes it might make me even feel anger. So, for example, there's a film by Otto Mühl that when I saw it, I started screaming and ran all around the gallery, like, you know, going crazy and saying I won't show my work next to this film. I never got it out of my head. I love it. And now if I curated a show, I would probably put this film in the show. So it's funny. It's things that have to really get me, and even if it's in terms of convulsion, but I've got to really feel it. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
This is, I think it's the question for Tracy and Kari. Maybe you could both answer it. So we are really excited about the show at the Royal Academy. What in particular should we look out for?
I could just say that the show at the Royal Academy of Arts is slightly different from the show that will be in Oslo. In Oslo, we will include more works and also more installations, art from Tracy that shows more obvious kind of the impact by Edvard Munch on her art. And also from her earlier time, let us say we have My Bed will be included, and It Always Hurts, A Blanket, and also the film Homage to Edvard Munch and All My Dead Children. So that will be an important kind of entrance into the how to see and experience the exhibition in Oslo. It's more, I suppose, I haven't seen how the show is now at the Royal Academy of Arts. It's co-created there by Edith Devaney with Tracy. So I really hope I soon will come to London and see it, how it
Tracy,
is installed.
what's your if you had to pick one piece from the Royal Academy show, which piece would you pick? What's the most important piece?
That I could keep.
I didn't say you could keep it.
No, but I mean to live with forever. For Munch, yeah. I'd actually, strangely enough, I'd choose the Old Woman in Hospital, right. Because it's really serious, it's really somber. There's you know, the psychological impact of it is really sad and really powerful. There is nothing generous in terms of there's no feel-good factor about this artwork at all, and it's shocking to me, and I really love it. And but I was going to say, to answer your question quickly about my work in this show, what people I hope will come away from, well, they'll realise that I can paint, because I think a lot of people don't know that I paint. They just know about the bed or whatever, and they don't know that I did painting at the Royal College of Art. I've been painting for 35 years or whatever, you know. So I hope that people understand that I can paint. I hope
they will. We've run out of time, but final question, great question. Tracy, if you could ask Munch a question, what would it be?
Are you gay? That would be my number one question, I reckon. Yeah, and then my next question, I think I wouldn't want to ask him a question. I want to ask him if he's okay. Are you all right? Are you okay? That's what I'd like to ask him.
Very good. Well, thank you, Tracy. It's brilliant to see you here today. Thank you, Kari. Thank you, Simon. for your brilliant contribution to today's event, and to Intelligence Squared for the help in putting it together. I really hope you enjoyed watching today, and I seriously recommend that when lockdown finishes, that you go along to the Royal Academy and see this show, because it really is something special. It's a very, very powerful show, a very clever show, a very smart show, and you will leave a different person, I guarantee it. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.